This episode, Foundations, the Basics. In this episode, the Handyman Pros have a discussion about the basics of all construction foundations. Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help you save time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled Foundations, the Basics. And to help me explain, I am here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy John. Yeah. Johnny?
Oh, and he is cheerful today. Well, I am actually, if you go back I don't know when that show aired, we were talking about the foam cannon that, we spray Clorox and Dawn and that. And
yep.
I just did this for my neighbor as well as my own house before the fall and the winter here. Well, it's fall now. But
does winter come after fall? I'm just checking. Anyway, keep going.
It depends. It can come before fall if you look at it that way. It depends upon how you look at it.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
But it takes off all that black crap and all kinds of stuff growing on me. It looks great, So anyways, that's why I'm cheerful. I was
You took one of your own tips and it actually worked.
Man, I did that. And then I'm really happy because I finally replaced this old brass sink in my basement. We'll talk about that later with a new stainless steel one. So that was great. So I got a lot of stuff done. I mean, it's been an interesting life in the last month, let me tell you. So anyways.
Well, yeah, well, it is what it is. So when we were talking in the pre-show, we decided we were having conversation about, like, what have we talked about, what have we not talked about? And I guess we decided, right? We decided we've never actually talked about foundations, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever specifically addressed it, and that's one of the things that always, when I look around my house, it's one of the things I don't want to see is any issues there.
No, yes,
and we're talking about the house foundation, not the difference between a foundation and a nonprofit. But boom,
bada bing. I'll be here all week.
So.
That's right.
So Larry, what brought this about was that you were telling me that you were looking at some rental properties and you saw some foundation issues.
Well, yeah, actually, we saw the symptoms of what a foundation issue was, and then upon further inspection saw what were the foundations, and it was like, yeah, okay. So this brings out to a good ends up being a good show. And this isn't necessarily if you're just buying a home. So we're going to go through again the basics of it. But we got out and we looked at a couple of different homes, and when we look at these rental houses. So being that I'm a handyman, I like to do basically studs out remodels or major renovations to homes, because I get them at obviously a very discounted rate, and not to get into the depths of it. But the biggest thing for me is if I do the renovations, I know the level of work that gets done. So that's why I buy these homes this way. It takes me forever to get them done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I want to know the quality level of work that gets done in the homes. But when I'm out searching, actually doing my qualification process, I'm looking for several, I'll call them key points on the home, right? Along with making sure there's water there and sewer there and or electric there. Believe it or not, I've found homes that don't have electric. I'm also looking really at the major cost areas, and foundations are probably the beginning of, as I say, it's the basics of all building, right? So if your foundation is bad on your home, let's say a catastrophic failure on your foundation, it's time to run the bulldozer through it, basically, because the cost of repairing it can be uber excessive. I mean, it can be. It can, and we're not trying to scare y'all folks, but there's some things that we're going to talk about foundation basics and about, recommended remedies and some things that you just sort of need to be aware of. So with that said, John, where do we want to go with this? We want to talk about what are foundations made of? What kind of materials?
You bring up, it's a good point to always look at your foundation. I certainly have, had foundation issues, up north. And as we get into this, we'll talk about it. Now, basically, with the foundations I've seen are just, I think everybody out there has seen is they're concrete, right? They're poured slabs. They could be stacked.
It could be stacked.
Block. They could be block.
Concrete block.
Yep. I mean, you name it, right? And it can be a foundation, but generally it's going to be stone, concrete, or brick.
Right. Yep.
And they all have, that there's always a way for there to be a point of failure with these things if they're not properly installed. Number one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we do want to just talk a little. Let's talk a little bit about earth for a minute, just while we're thinking about it, right? So different areas in the country have different concerns, right?
Yes.
And so we both grew up in the north. We're going to call it. John grew up in Chicago. Yep. I grew up outside Rochester, New York. And one of the things in those areas is there's a bunch of things to worry about, not worry about, but to think about. And it's more to think about in your foundations. Do you have a frost line? Well, up there you have a frost line. So the ground freezes, and depending on where you are, it freezes to different levels. I know where I grew up, you pretty much had to bury everything 3 feet underground to get below the frost line. Was it that way in Chicago, John?
I want to say that it was either 3 or 5 feet.
It could be 5, yeah, because Chicago gets
something like that. It's been a while. I mean, you had to go down. You had to go down a ways.
You have to go down a ways, yeah. And I say Chicago could be different than Rochester, largely because Chicago actually gets quite a bit colder than Rochester does. Surprise, surprise. Not really a surprise, but the Midwest gets colder in total. It gets into the negatives a lot in Chicago, where Rochester not quite so much. But here in Atlanta now, so John and I now both live in Atlanta, and here we don't worry about a frost line at all. In fact, if the ground freezes, it's actually kind of interesting because you get all these little frost pops, I guess, for lack of a better word, but it only lasts a day, and it's just usually the water freezes under the ground and pops the dirt up a little bit. It looks like moles are running through your yard, basically.
Right.
But yeah, so we don't, here in Atlanta, we worry about other things. And too, I lived in Texas for a while, and I know in western states they have some of these issues. If you live in a dry climate, you have to worry more about your foundation, making sure there's enough water on your foundation than not enough water. And of course, there's no frost lines there either. So in the warmer climates. So there's that. There's also soil types that you have to be worried about because different soils react differently. So here in the South, we're in clay. I know when I was in Rochester, it was all loam. Loam is a very porous, and it's a soil that has a lot of can compact a lot. Do you remember what you had in Chicago, Johnny, or not?
Just good old black dirt.
Yeah, that's loam. So that's the same thing. But here in the South, it's all clay. So we have a little bit different things. Like they'll pour a slab straight on top of the clay. I mean, they can dig down a little bit. You can pour a foundation, it'll be fine. You can do stacked stone here, where you literally just put the house on stacked stone piers. That's all old school at this point, but there are many houses here are built here, and also in places like Florida and things, they're actually on piers, right? So it's a concrete tube or a concrete square that's put down into the ground a certain number of feet to make sure that it's stable, and that works just fine, or it can.
And some of them can be very creative, by the way.
Yes, they can. Yeah.
I'll have to dig up some pictures of how people over the years have been very creative by shoring up those things.
Yeah, shoring up piers,
with pieces of wood and everything else, and jack up the house. But anyways,
right. Well, anyway, yeah. I mean, it's just so again, this is just kind of a primer, and you need to look and see what you have in your home, and you could be any one of those things that we've discussed. I mean, I bought a house that was on stacked stone. It was fascinating. It was old. It was built in 1926. And it was just sitting there on top of some stacked stones. I looked at it and I'm like, really? But it was rock solid. It didn't show any symptoms that were showing any failure. So let's talk about, well, that's kind of what we're talking about, right, Johnny? Our failure points. Like, so how does a foundation fail?
Well, when you just talked about it, you just at the end, that little intro there about the soil and stuff, it's really the settlement of the soil. How does that happen? There's certain things that makes that happen.
Yep.
It can be most of the modern homes can be, if they're not properly installed, that can, over years, have a settlement issue. You're going to get a crack. Things, all homes seem to have some kind of a settling that goes on. It's almost unavoidable. But it's to what extent, is it such that it actually will crack the foundation?
Right.
And I'm sure that we've all seen all these ads for, the foundation repairs. Okay.
Right.
So it is something that happens a lot. It can be very serious and very costly too.
Almost all foundation repairs are costly. We do want to state that up front.
Yes. And we've addressed this before, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but what you can do to, at least as a homeowner, to mitigate that.
Correct.
And a lot of times it's things that, you can help yourself out here by just taking some of the precautions that we'll be talking about. But, there could be things like even the material failures in the foundation.
If they have, so right. I'm gonna bag on our favorite television station for a while. I was watching one of the shows, and it was one of these flip shows, and it was one of these real short-term shows, right? And they were actually pouring a new foundation for a home. And they were using quick-drying concrete for the foundation. And I'm like, nobody uses quick-drying concrete for foundations. And the reason why was they were doing a repair on this foundation. They had to have the house done in 7 days. And if you're going to do it in 7 days...
Oh, yeah. I know what episode you're talking about.
Yeah. And so... that's a place where, that's just, by the way, folks, the reason that I say that is we've done a show on concrete, but we're not going to discuss it at length. But the faster concrete dries, the less strong it is. It's not as strong, and it's more prone to failure. And so if you're using quick drying concrete for a foundation, you're asking for trouble. That is an ask for trouble. And no foundation contractor will ever use quick-dry concrete. Like, I was shocked that they put this out on television because I was like, I'm not buying that thing. So anyway, so that's where you can get materials failures. And I'm going to tell you, so I grew up in a house built in 1812. It was a dug basement, and it was made out of stack stone with mortar. And believe it or not, that 150-year-old foundation was still good when we left the house in the mid-'80s. And that was because they used the right materials. Now, I've seen other homes here in the fabulous Atlanta area, particularly in the building heydays of, the 2006 and the 90s eras, where they used shoddy materials and the material failed. So meaning if the concrete starts flaking off and starts coming apart, you've got big issues. You've got some issues. So you can have material. My point is you can have materials failure. And, nothing lasts forever, I guess I want to say. Even the pyramids have a bit of degradation. So, be that as it may. John, other failure points, right, mostly have to do with moisture issues, right? Too much water, or if you're...
Right, too much water. I mean, we talked about before is that, you're going to, if you surround your house with water and it's coming right on, right down in your foundation, and all your landscaping is slumped inwards towards the house, that's something that you folks, that you can take care of. And it happens a lot. Even if you've, just fixed it maybe a couple years ago, it's just earth, right? I mean, it can wash away and,
it
but
settles
you gotta
also. It settles,
yeah,
right?
and you got to be on top of it, right? You got to be on top of this because the more water that comes in that way is going to weaken the support around the foundation.
Right. And conversely, too little water, if you're in a dry climate, same thing. The ground will shrink up and it'll pull away from your foundation, and then that causes issues as well. And you people in dry climate, when I lived in Texas, that was a big thing. People used to water their foundations to keep them moist. And so be aware, a lot of this is local too, by the way. If you just ask the people around where you live, like we were talking about the frost issues. Well, it's different in different parts of the country, and it's different at different elevations as well. So just be aware, ask local people. They'll tell you, if you're new to an area, ask local people. If you've been around an area all the time, all you can do is ask at the hardware store, and they'll say, oh yeah, you need to do this, right? It's really, really about that simple. We touched a little bit on poor building methods, right, John, or poor building policies. And here in Atlanta, again, during those building heydays, did they build on fill dirt, John?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's one of the things, uncompacted. And there has been a lot of homes that I've seen that have settled because of that.
Yeah.
And guess what happens after that? The foundation cracks.
Yeah.
I have seen where I have been in homes. I have been in homes that were built on that, like a fill dirt, and they have been charged like $30,000 and more to fix that foundation.
Yeah, and that's just, folks, there's no way to pick that off. Like, you're not going to be able to see that in advance. That's just something that shows up through time. Now, we, in a forensic analysis, right, when we look at it all these years later, we look at it and go, why did they do this in the first place? But you really can't tell that at the time they pour that foundation. It's very difficult.
Yes. Now, let me just add this on a little side note. This is the way codes have changed over the years because of practices like this.
Yes.
When in the 90s, when homes around here were being built, when they're starting to be built, the builder got away with a lot of things. And that one of the things that they did was they used to dig big like burial pits and take all the excess trees and things that they would take out and just bury them in your yard. Well, guess what? Over the years, as that decays, you got huge, big, sinkholes happening everywhere. And that cost a lot of money because you got to dig the whole thing back out. So that was another code change. But I'm saying that because a lot of times these builders would get away with things like that, and they'd put these burial pits and things next to driveways, and these sinkholes start to open up and start to swallow stuff up and weaken.
Yeah, and they same thing from the foundation side.
That's exactly where I'm going.
Yeah, they would not compact the dirt properly.
That's correct.
And then therefore they were about turning and burning, and I'm not bagging on anybody. It's just a reality. We've seen it over and over and over again in our area. And different states, different municipalities have different codes, and I'm sure there's places where it's just fine. But we've actually seen the results of this here in the greater Atlanta area, where you see homes, and you can tell after 30 years they're built on fill dirt. It's just insane to me. Insane. Just insane. So one of the other things that we talk about this all the time is water. Well, it's water leaks. But, folks, you do realize if you have a leak in your plumbing that it can cause foundation issues. And believe it or not, it can seep either from the inside or the outside and get out into the ground and cause settling and or other issues, freezing, all kinds of things. Wash, it can create sinkholes next to your foundation. But water leaks inside can be really bad. John, what's one of those other ones? This is one people don't think about, right? But, John, have you ever seen a foundation problem caused by a
tree root?
Tree root. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some well, that wasn't my neighbor. It was another somebody down the street in a different neighborhood. They had a lot of issues with tree roots. The thing is that people plant trees, and just another little side note is you plant these little trees and they look really nice, and then one day you turn around and it's 15 years later and these things are starting to become monsters. and you planted them too close.
Yeah, too close to the house, right?
Exactly.
And they creep, and they're incredibly strong. Like you don't understand the pressure that can occur. Think about it this way. How many of you have seen a driveway that's been cracked by a root? I'll bet the large percentage of you have actually seen that, where a driveway is broken in half because a tree root has grown underneath it. Definitely in the septic world, in the septic system world, you see problems with tree roots. Hey, John, have you ever heard of roto-rooter? Yeah. Okay. Root.
Yeah.
Root. Right. Root.
Oh yeah. All the time. This is a big thing.
But our point is that a tree too close to the home can damage your foundation as well, because those roots will get bigger, and it is that slow damage, right? It takes years and years and years, But by the time you realize it, it's almost too late in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want you to be aware of that. And then the other failure cause, or whatever you want to call it, failure point, is extreme seasonal, and we've already talked on that one. But lots of big swings in temperature and or in humidity, we'll call it. Johnny, what are the? How could people tell if you have? Just this is very basic. How can you tell if you have a foundation problem?
Well, the one thing that I've seen when I've walked in some folks' homes that have had it is the first thing that I've noticed is uneven floors, because one side of the house is, the other side's kind of heaving up a little bit.
Yep.
And that will start to play hell on the rest of the inside of your home. And one of the things is you're walking across the floors, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm walking like, one leg's higher than the other type of thing, and it's really strange. You can start to feel that something's not right here.
Yeah, we went to. I just have to tell a quick story. We went to look at this one rental house, and we're out there. We're looking at it, and I'm like, "What's wrong? What's wrong with it?" And the floor. I mean, the floor. There must have been a 1 foot drop over about 20. I mean, it looked like a slope. I mean, really. And I look, and that of course makes me look underneath. I look underneath. I'm like, "Yep, there's a pass. We're not going for this one," because the whole foundation was shot. I mean, shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it just wasn't worth even investing in the home to do it because of the amount. It's a long story, but it just wasn't going to be worth it. It just it killed the whole deal, is what it did. But yeah, uneven floors. And then the other, one of the other things too is drywall cracks or cracks in the walls in general, right? If you go in and see any kind of cracks in the drywall or brick or any concrete cracks or anything like that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but you have to investigate, right? You have to go, why is this happening, right, John?
Yeah, I've been in another home that I fixed. I fixed a bunch of drywall, and it all of a sudden it dawned on me, that there was a bunch of cracks, and the way these cracks were occurring, it didn't take me long to think that the house settled. Now, why did it settle? I don't know.
Settle.
I didn't, take this up in at that kind of level, but I certainly looked around the outside and made sure that it wasn't too bad. So, other things that were obvious, like the brick cracks and things like that. But, sometimes the homes will settle a little bit, and, drywall is going to be the first, that's going to be the first target of anything like that.
Yeah, because it's the softest. It's the easiest to break. And
correct.
Now also, we do want to caution people. This can also be the result of like a floor settlement also. So it's not necessarily your foundation, but it's just something to start an investigation, right? So if your joists are not done properly, or you've got a header or something that maybe isn't supporting the load quite the way it's supposed to, they'll settle no matter what. But through the years, you can get drywall cracks that are caused not by foundation but by other causes. So just be aware of that. We're not trying to raise the flag of alarm, but
right.
It starts an investigation process. Usually if brick or concrete cracks, then you're into something different, usually. And two, when we refer to this, I think we're referring to outside walls as well. Do you think that, John?
Mostly
it's outside
that's why I said I would go. After it kind of dawned on me about this drywall work that I was doing, I kind of said, let me take a walk around your house here just for a second.
Yeah, right.
Just to see if there's something obvious.
Yeah.
Because it was just the way that that these cracks were lining up. But anyways, that's that's something just to keep in the back of your mind if you start to see things like that.
Right. So one of the other symptoms too are leaks in the basement. Now that's not necessarily a symptom of a bad foundation. It could just be an excessive amount of moisture, but it can be signs of a bad foundation.
Well, I mean, obviously, if it starts to rain and you've got water in the basement, you got an issue.
You got an issue. Yeah.
If you live in a climate where the snow starts to melt and you have water in the basement, you have some issues. So
yeah. Another thing to look at is if your windows and doors don't close properly. And again, same thing as with the sinking floors. If it's your interior doors, it can be settling in the house, in the main part of the wood. Wood actually moves, folks, if you didn't know that, over years. But if your windows on your outside walls don't close quite properly, it can be an indication of a foundation issue. And the other thing is, look at the moldings too. So if you look up at the corner where your window trim moldings are, and you're seeing where they're splitting, it's one of two things. Either the caulk has just gotten old and shrunk out, or it could be that the foundation is just a place to start doing an investigation, right? So, those are some of the symptoms. I'm sure we don't have them all, but we've got quite a bit. The results of all of this, Johnny, are that you can have structural issues, right, where if your foundation is bad, you can have an actual structural failure, meaning your house can fall in, right? Which is worst case scenario. It's worst case scenario.
Right. Right. Not a good day.
No, not a good day, right? But the other one, the biggest one for most people, is just you're going to have a resale issue or a repair issue that's going to be very costly.
Yeah. We actually have a home in my neighborhood that has a rider, not a rider, but a special note on the deed that the foundation is cracked.
Yeah, that's not good.
So if you're out there and you're looking for a home to buy and you see something like that is disclosed,
that's a negotiating point.
Exactly. An obvious one, right?
Yes.
And it's so the loss of a resale value is there. So just to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah. The other thing is you're gonna have to replace glass and windows and doors and stuff at a faster rate than otherwise.
Right. And I think at this point it's one of those things, Larry, especially when you're looking for a home, maybe the rental homes and things like that that is the number one thing you're going to look for is any foundation issues, because the rest of it you can fix kind of easily. Like if it needs a new roof, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I can put a new roof on it. But if it has a foundation issue, then I've got a real issue.
Yeah, we can fix foundation issues. I guess it boils down to cost, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it just boils down to cost.
That's the point,
and it's expensive.
Right? Anything can be. That's correct. Anything can be fixed, but to what end?
Right, exactly. So we'll get into that in a second, but let's talk about what are some things that people can do themselves. And we've only got a very small number of things, folks. Our end piece is going to be big here. But what are some of the things you can do to prevent foundation issues? Well, we've talked about this about 10 million times, but we're going to talk about it again because we still, every day, John goes over to one of our friends' house or one of his customers' houses, and his gutters are full of leaves again. John, this has happened.
Right.
He had the crew over there the other day, and already they need to be cleaned out. But get the water out and away from your house. Make sure that the grade of your home close to your house is away from the house. And we've said it before, but we're going to say it again. Make sure that the water flows away from the home. When they build a foundation, they backfill in around the foundation, and that ground through time sinks and it compacts, and it will cause a negative grade right next to the house. All you have to do is take dirt, fill it in, get it higher than the rest of the yard, and you're good to go. Same thing with your gutters. Make sure your gutters run the water away from the house, not towards the house, away from the house, and you're good. John, anything else that somebody can do themselves? I kind of think not, right?
No, I think that's pretty much the extent of it, unless you really are going to now get very aggressive.
Right.
And really want to take on a big job. One of my friends, him and his dad, they actually dug out around the foundation in Ohio and redid it.
Yep. Big job.
Yeah. That's a big job.
So most foundation issues need to be fixed from the outside, which means digging.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. You can't just plug something from the inside if you have a cracked foundation. We had one in Chicago. It was cracked, and we had guys come out and try to fix it from the inside. Never worked over the years, and I'm talking 20 years of just constantly this thing is a mess. And then finally we had that there are ways to do this, and they can go from the outside and fix it. That's the only way to do it.
Right.
Okay. So, and then finally, it really does take a professional. We're not the professional foundation guys.
No.
I'm not going to pretend to be, but call a professional who can, diagnose what's happening and, then prescribe, what's going to take to fix it.
So it does bring up another question that I have, and you and I have discussed this. This isn't in the show notes, but I'm going to bring it up right now. We're talking about mostly basements here, right? And you're talking about your parents' place, which was built, in the 50s? Is that when it was built, John? Something like that.
Yeah.
What is the year that they started requiring waterproofing around the outside of a foundation? Do we know that date? I think it was in the 70s, right?
That's generally anything built. Here's the deal. Yeah, if we're talking basements, anything built before, let's say, 1979 or in the 80s was really not meant to be lived in.
Yeah,
does that make sense? They're more of a stand-up crawl space, that would house your mechanicals down there, right? So people, would especially the older homes. In the 60s, the 50s and 60s, there's no way. But, we all did it. We all did it. Right. We all threw a bar down there and, called it wonderful, and a pool table or a ping pong table, right? And, called it wonderful. But the issue is that there's still moisture that's coming up through the floor or out of the walls. And then at some point, I think it was probably in the 80s that they started to wrap or spray, a tar or something else.
Waterproofing, yeah.
Waterproofing around the outside. And also then they would put like
vapor
plastic,
a
vapor barrier for the basement floor.
Yep.
Otherwise, there is no way to stop the moisture coming through the concrete.
Right.
And the way you can tell, and this is from the experts, and it's very simple, just put a piece of plastic down on your basement floor and leave it there for about 24 hours and see if it gets wet as the moisture comes through onto the plastic.
Yep.
And this is a big indicator if you can put down what kind of floor that you can put down in that basement if you're going to build out that basement. So anyways, that's a whole nother topic. But
I just wanted to mention it because it kind of comes. It's part and parcel of the same thing because some of the symptoms aren't necessarily. It's not necessarily because of a foundation. Well, it's a foundation issue, but it's not. It's because of a building code change that's different today than what it was back in the day. And again, and to your point, it was a stand-up crawl space, not really a living space, right? So I just wanted to
exactly right.
I just wanted to mention that. But the upshot of all of this is that if your grading is good and you've got the water running away from your house, it becomes time to call the professional. There's not much you're going to be able to do yourself. There's just not.
Right.
I mean, we could get into peers and doing stuff like that, but we're not going to because we are not professionals in this department. We will talk about that.
No,
for sure.
No.
So the other day, I was over at your house and I noticed that you had this round burn mark in the back of your yard, and it looked like somebody had a foundation on 3 points back there, John. And I was going to ask you went dark on me for like a day, you weren't even there.
Larry, I think it wasn't it visiting your house after before it came over here, or what was going on there, man? I think that was the spaceship, wasn't it?
I took mine apart. I took mine apart, and yours, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I did too. I was really fascinated how that damn thing was flying around. So
maybe
I didn't put it together. It's still a part in my
it's in
my garage.
Wait, Johnny's got Area 54. That's in the. We're past 52 and 51. Johnny's got Area 54. Yes. It's in somewhere in Milton, Georgia, folks. He's got the parts and the bodies are based in his basement. Anyway, with that said, there we go.
In the foundation.
No, that's Jimmy. Never mind. That's Jimmy Hoffa. There you go.
Yeah, right.
All right, folks. Sorry, bad jokes aside. If you enjoy the Handyman Pros Radio Show, please tell your friends and neighbors. Make it shareable. Send this off to your friends and neighbors. Tell them, oh, these two guys, they're something else. They sometimes know what they're talking about. We try. Anyway, we try. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com, or send us an email at handymanprosradioshow@gmail.com. Either way, you can get to us. We updated our website. All the radio shows, or all the podcasts, are now out on our website. So if you want to listen to anything out of our 200-plus shows, it's out there on our website. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. And if you would like to join the conversation, to ask us some questions and stuff, we are out there on Facebook. That's at Handyman Pros. And we do Twitter every once in a while, too, at Handyman Radio. Anything else, Johnny? Am I missing anything?
No, I want to thank everybody for joining the Facebook group. That's really been growing, so really appreciate it and look forward to a lot of questions and just the whole community interaction out there. Yep. So that's it's a great help for everybody.
It is. Folks, we want to thank you for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.